Welcome back once again. Look at that, another bully figure. So, moving on to Seth Kolbe here, another one of the prefects. Definitely tried something totally new with this one. The only cloth in the entire figure is actually the sweater vest, which is basically glued on to the figure after I sculpted the dress shirt. And then what I did was I used an actual Jack's coat from one of the, I think it was from like Mean Gene Okerlund or another figure, but there were quite a bit of figures they had that actually had this sculpt as kind of a rubber material. It actually took paint very well from what I remember. So you can see it's kind of collected hair and stuff through the years because there's a little bit of stickiness on there. So not only have my techniques improved, but the products I used have changed as well. Pretty much all I use now for a clear coat is the Model Masters line that Testers makes. You can buy it at Hobby Lobby. I swear by the stuff, especially their flat coat. It's extremely durable, and when you use it, it's almost like you can't really, all you can see is the paint. You can't really tell that there's a coat on there. So quite happy with it. With the figure that I'm currently making for the Secret Santa this year, I've used their gloss coat for the first time. I don't like wasting, so I actually had some Rust-Oleum that I finally ran out of that I was using, and I was not too happy with it because it seemed really, no matter how little amount of it that you used, it seemed like it was really thick. So with the Model Masters, it's just right. So quite happy with it. But having said that, it should be a pretty quick review here. We've also gone over the articulation of the Big Show figure, which is what this was sculpted out of. So sanded out all the joints and then actually sculpted on the arms. So if you see here, I've tried to do a little bit of bends in the fabric and everything. As I'm kind of looking at this, I kind of laugh because I remember thinking about how awesome I thought everything looked, and now I've gotten much better at actually sculpting fabric in and not even afraid to actually put a piece of fabric over it as I'm sculpting and then pull it off so you kind of get that texture. But once again, looking back, this was the best I had done at this point, and so how I got to where I'm at now was by doing things like this. So I'm not ashamed of it by any means. I just always look back and say, hey, this is how I got better. This is how I can get better, and hopefully I can look at the figures I'm making now and do videos here in a few years, look back at those and say, wow, I thought I was really good then, and I have improved ever since then too. So that's my goal, is always be better. So once again, sculpted the shirt as well. So I do remember I used, actually used Milliput for this character. I love working with Milliput. The only thing I don't like is that it's really heavy once it dries. It's actually really solid. You can tell it's a real good product. It's hard to break. It's hard to sand. But if you do a lot of sculpting on the upper part of a figure with Milliput, but not the bottom, they become quite top heavy. So that's generally why I use Aves epoxy these days, but I still will use strategically, especially if I'm fixing something on a figure, something broke or everything, I definitely go right to Milliput for that because it is strong, it's durable, and it has a little more of a sticky quality, a little bit more of an adhesive quality than the Aves epoxy does, but Aves is quite light and durable once it cures. So typical articulation, once we are up and down, and if you notice, we do have some paint rub going on in there. I do remember I have a little bit less with this figure. I remember trying to stick an X-Acto knife in there to kind of carve that out to eliminate some of that rub, but if you can kind of see, you can still see the paint is loose there. Up and down with the elbows is pretty much all we have there as well. With this, the wrist does turn. It's a little bit tight in there. And then we have our up and down with the hands as well. Can you tell I haven't bent these in a while? They've been sitting on display for a couple years now. So once again, any kind of extra paint or anything that these picks up, you see it kind of sticks to this coat, kind of has a sticky quality. So that's why I've started using different materials for the final coat for sealing the paint. I believe what I used, it was some kind of brush on clear coat that I got at Hobby Lobby. I'm not sure the brand name or anything, but seemed to work pretty well on the actual part of the figure, but on this rubber it was definitely not good. Like I said, I use the Model Masters for that now whenever I'm sculpting on any kind of silicone or rubber, and it doesn't leave it sticky, which is nice. So up and down with our legs, basically, you can kind of see here where I dremeled out the joints and then painted those as well. So when the knee bends, we actually don't get paint rub on the actual knee joint on the inside there. These Jax figures were just single jointed knees. So as you can see, we just have the single joint there. And then once again with the foot, I remember watching Craig Worak's video. I think at this point I remembered him showing and talking about a product called Procreate. And I don't believe I actually used that on Seth here, because as I'm feeling the boot cut or the pant over the boot here, it's actually quite hard. If you use that Procreate stuff, it has quite a bit of give to it. So anytime I'm doing any kind of clothing over a joint like I would here on the foot, I use Procreate now these days because it gives a lot of bend to it and it doesn't have that tendency to want to scrape off the paint. So with these feet on this figure, this must have been a little bit later Big Show. You see we actually have a little bit of left and right as well as our up and down on our foot joint. And for whatever reason, he does stand kind of crooked. The one, the right leg seems to kind of go in, but he does stand freely. You can see I'm kind of moving my hand freely behind him. So he does still stand, but has a tendency to want to fall over to the right if you're posing him in certain positions. I believe the wrestler's name was Finlay that I used for the head sculpt here. I had to fill in the tooth, I remember, because I think he had a big gap in his teeth. Did a little bit of sculpting on the face, and then I might have done a little bit on the hair as well, but as bulky as the neck and everything was in this head, he does not have much head articulation at all. So we got just a little bit of left and right and hardly any up and down. But I was pretty happy with how the face actually turned out on this one. So not much room to paint the eyes in there, I remember, because they're quite squinted. But I remember dealing with a little bit more blues and reds when I was actually painting the face. So as I'm looking at it now, actually not too shabby comparatively, especially to the other ones. It's not as blotchy, a little bit smoother. My wife had actually showed me this additive you can put to acrylic paint that kind of keeps it wet a little bit longer and allows you to blend a little bit better. So that is Mr. Seth. As you can see here, once again, the coat is kind of a rubber-like material, so there's a little bit more give as he's, going over and twisting, so it's not actually rubbing the paint off of the pants at that point. I hope you liked the video. One thing I forgot that I was going to do as well is kind of compare him to Max. So if you see the kind of difference between the two, as far as the whole feel goes, we have the cloth on Max, and then basically the sculpted look on Seth. As you can see, it kind of gives it more of that true action figure-like quality and less like a doll. You're a doll, Max, you're a doll. But once again, felt like I improved quite a bit from one figure to the next. So hope you liked the video. Thank you for watching as always. Hopefully see you next time.